Hello, Tom Lavecchia here with the latest edition of and very special edition of the Armchair NBA. We have Giovanni Rocco, author of Giovanni's Ring. We're going to talk about his life inside the Real Sopranos. He talked to the guy who laid my father out to rest, amongst other people that I was related to, as well as people in the life in New Jersey. Giovanni Rocco, welcome to the Armchair NBA. How you doing today?
Tommy, I'm doing good. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. So let's jump right in, man. So give us a bit of background. Tell us about your formative years and what kind of made you as a person prior to getting into law enforcement.
I was a Jersey kid. I was the black sheep of my family. That's the best way to sum it up short term. I'm third generation cop. I should have never been a cop. I defied authority. Just a real brief, as a young kid, I had a lot of problems growing up. I was a problem child. I caused my parents a lot of grief. I was bad in school. I was bad outside of school, hanging out with the wrong guys. And, that didn't sit well with my old man. Yeah. So, as I got older, him and I butted heads together. I never thought I'd be a cop. Never. Yeah. I had that feeling like I wanted to be, as I described in the book. I knew the moment I said to myself, I could do this. I always fought for good in the schoolyard. I'd pick a fight with you if you were the bully. Even if I lost, I'd come at you head on. So that was my thing, and then one day I bribed my way out of high school, as I talk about in the book. It's not my proudest.
I love that story, by the way.
It's typical Jersey, guy that, grew up with my parents and came to me, and I had to go buy him some liquor, bribe my way out of high school. Every year I was in summer school and I was a big pain. So my mother and father happily bought the liquor that this guy wanted to get out of high school. And I did. And I got lucky. I got a job at the phone company. And then the test came up to take the cop's position. I was a city cop in Hudson County, New Jersey. Yes. And I worked there for a number of years. That's where I did my career before I got into the task force. And early in my career, I changed my evil ways. I was never a down and out criminal, but I always ran with that dark element, because that's where the fun was. That's where the risk was. Yeah. So I gave it up. I hung it up. I hung out with a lot of outlaw biker types. I was drawn to them in my family. And then the other side of my family were hardworking, blue collar people. Yep. But I did that to really get under my old man's skin. And when I said my goodbyes to them, the day I took the job and I went to the academy the day before, I said my goodbyes, because some of them were hardcore bikers. Some of them were members and associates of some outlaw motorcycle gangs. And that was it. So, and who knew? 9 months later into the job, I came to work on my motorcycle. I got in trouble for riding it. And my chief came to me and asked me if I'd do a couple undercovers. I did that. That was successful. And then I wound up with the DEA for a number of years. I took a break after 9/11 for a bit and all of that. Took a step back from it and then regrouped myself. And I wound up going, I was drawn to it. I was still drawn to that adrenaline. So I wound up on the FBI task force for a number of years. And that's where I finished out my career.
Nice. And it's funny because we spoke before me reading the book. And this is the first time in over 400 something odd interviews. Sounds like a lot. And I probably interviewed about 50 or so authors. It's the first time I ever read the book prior to the interview. And the reason why I do that is I want an organic conversation and then I read the book afterwards. But I had to read the book before and I was worried because I'm like, I'm going to be disappointed because I still kind of hold some of these guys in high regard. And in a way, the book was great. And I also was disappointed. We'll get to why in a second. So let's start off. You get your assignment. Tell us a bit about a day in the life. And you weren't really going after the Cavs for a while. Like, give us kind of your assignment and how it started off.
No, I mean, I had an organized crime background because early in my career, when I got my gold shield with the city, I wanted to do narcotics. And they stuck me in Vice. Daytime Vice. I chased around OC guys, bookmakers and loan sharks and all that back in the day. Yeah. And then I wound up on the FBI task force for the organized crime task force. And who knew I was doing cameo undercover work and I was a full-time undercover employee for the FBI. Yeah. And then one day somebody called me up as a support, said, listen, I got to do a narcotics deal down in Atlantic City. If you can come down and help me out. There's some knockaround guys coming down, young guys. Yeah. And, it was no heavy lift for us at that level. Yeah. But they were serious guys in a way that we wanted to trigger lock some of them, get them, it was a quick hit, for the court. And who knew, these guys bit, they created their own scenario of us and created a backstory for us, which we didn't intend. And, they were going around the streets, telling everybody that we were Bruno Scarfo guys, thinking we were Philly guys. And we
Which
didn't
kind
care.
of which kind of almost bit you in the butt later on.
Right. Because I didn't care, though, early on in the case, Tommy, because, you know, it's going to be a quick hit. It's a narcotics case.
Yeah.
You guys could believe what you want. But who knew? You know, one thing led to another. And once the rumor hits the street and you're making money with somebody, word spreads fast. And in the Cosa Nostra world, greed is everything. So,
yeah. Well, I do have a side question, and I think you could answer this because I think we're in different worlds. I talked to a DEA guy for a while, and he could have come on the show, but we were chatting it up, and we were talking about Italian OC. And he says the DEA looks at Italian OC much different than the FBI does. And he kind of asserted that, you know, the FBI, not that they hold them to any honorable level, but they kind of like get them on their crimes and kind of do whatever. The DEA guys just look at them as like kind of dirtbag drug dealers and cut through like the BS and kind of cut through a lot of the pleasantries. What are your thoughts? Do you think the DEA and the FBI look at Italian OC different, or do you look at it the same?
Well, I think they're each different in their own way. I loved working with the DEA because we were knocking down doors and we were, you know, collars for dollars at that time. And, you know, we were running and gunning. I mean, when you want to do good police work, the DEA is in the street just kicking it up. And wherever the dust settles, it settles. FBI is a little more methodical. They go by their playbooks. They have to follow everything is, you know, according to their what their manual says, the FBI agent manual. Step 1 says put your right foot forward. Step 2 is your left. So there's more, and which is good because as a more mature undercover, you look at things. I didn't go into things like I went in the DEA. We were more methodical. We looked at the crimes. I think what you're referring to is versus the quick hit that the DEA wanted in the stat. FBI wanted to pick at the whole administration. Let's find out where this is going. Let's find out how the RICO cases work. You know, it's very DEA uses RICO too, but in a different way. But when it comes to OC,
well,
the FBI is the big brother for investigation because they do the analysis. They analyze everything.
And they also have the resources and the money.
No, yeah.
All right. So you can hook up with a small-time drug dealer. You think it's kind of like a quick hit deal, but it draws you into the notorious DeCavalcante family. Why don't you tell, without giving up too much away of the book, give us a little bit about meeting a small-time hood brought you to Elizabeth, New Jersey.
Yeah. So when I was at that narcotics deal in Atlantic City, you know, these guys showed up and I was my typical Hudson County attitude, you know, like I was myself. I didn't try to change who I was. And they ran really late. And I was ticked off because I had to be home by a certain time. My wife was also law enforcement. So, you know, she knew, stop jerking around, get out, do your work and get home because I got to take care of my kids in the morning.
Yeah.
So I was genuinely pissed when these guys showed up late, you know, and they made me sit there. So because of that, you know, they were like, I can't keep coming down to Atlantic City all the time. I live up north. I'm in, you know, Elizabeth area. So it came up where, hey, Giovanni, you're up that way anyway a lot. Why don't you start dealing with these guys? So that's kind of how it kicked off. And the one guy, Jimmy Smalls, that I was dealing with, he was in the streets. He was born and raised in that whole Peterstown area of Elizabeth, New Jersey. So once he started making money, unbeknownst to me, he was looked down upon in the neighborhood as a bottom feeder, you know, not to really put him down, but everybody looked at him. He couldn't, as soon as he had 2 nickels, he was spending them or he was getting locked up.
Yeah. So
now all of a sudden he's running around in the street with money in his pocket and everybody wanted to know, how is this happening? Who are you with? So that's when.
Interesting. So, and he was the nephew of the eventual target. He was Charlie Stango's nephew, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And then he was Charlie Stango's nephew, which came out later because then when he started making the money, he was very close to Luigi Oliveri at the time, who was a pretty high level associate.
Louis Dogs, right?
Louis the dog, Louis the pet, Louis the dog. He had a couple of different names.
Yeah.
And Luigi was the one that came to Jimmy and said, you know, where are you getting this money? So he wanted to know. He came sniffing a little bit. And then I had an introduction to him. And then all of a sudden, Louis was a more polished guy in the street, more responsible guy you really wanted to deal with. You could set your watch to him. Yeah. I mean, he showed up with cash. He showed up on time. He was a real professional businessman.
Yeah.
And then it came out where Jimmy got jealous because I was doing too much business with Louis, and Louis had the connections more in the neighborhood than Jimmy did. Yeah. And he could squash Jimmy like a bug because Jimmy's uncle at this time was still in the can. He was doing I think like a 20-year bid for a homicide. And Jimmy came to me and he wanted to win me over and said, listen, my uncle is Charlie Stango. He's a soldier in the family, and he's going to be a captain soon. So it was like a chess game.
Interesting. So, and I find a lot of dynamics there because, I always have this kind of thing where, a made guy holds himself to higher standards, and we'll get to that in a minute, where like the nephews, sons, and daughters and that kind of stuff should also be to a higher standard. And this is not obviously the case. So I want to give a little bit more of context. First, the DeCavalcante family, right? Simone DeCavalcante was the originator. John Riggi was kind of around when you were around. There was going to be an administration change. The Cavalcante family is no joke. So give us a little bit of background on who they are and why they're serious guys.
They're serious guys. They're serious, Tom, in a way that not a lot of people understand. They're not one of the 5 major families, right? But they've been around the longest. Yes. They are the longest standing Italian-American organized crime family. Yep. And a lot of people don't give them credit for that. And they're probably the most vicious. Correct. In a way that back in the day, when the other families wanted work done, they would call. That's why they referred to the DeCavs as the farmers. Yeah. It's not to degrade them, but they farmed the other families would farm a lot of the work out. Yep. Because there were a lot of old school guys from the old country that came over here, and they brought those values over from Sicily and the motherland. And they were no joke. They didn't mess around. And because of that thing that they had in Peterstown in New York, they ruled with an iron fist. You mentioned Sam the plumber. Yeah. He was in charge, and he was a businessman, but yet he ruled with an iron fist. And then along came John Riggi, and John Riggi was a powerful man. He was probably more, in my opinion, he was probably more powerful than any of the other 5 family bosses.
Wow. That's a bold statement. Well, John Gotti did go to him for the Weiss hit. And they executed on it,
Yeah. And they all went to him. You know why? Because they wanted the construction, they wanted the union jobs, they wanted the port jobs. Yes. And because of their geographical location, they controlled all that. John Riggi controlled that with an iron fist.
Yes.
The cement jobs for all the construction in New York, that was all Riggi. Yep.
Now, one thing I found interesting, and you gotta kind of be a Jersey guy to know this. The Genovese were big in Bayonne, but the Cavalcantes weren't. I don't think you get this assignment if the Cavalcantes were big in Hudson or you grew up in Elizabeth. I think it worked out perfectly that you were a Hudson guy that kind of got the Elizabeth-ishness to it, right. But you weren't like me where they knew my father. You get what I'm saying? So I kind of felt, was it a plus that you were born in Hudson to do the Elizabeth thing? I know we're getting super hyper local here for Jersey.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
No, I do know what you're saying. And I thought in the beginning, Tom, that it would be okay. Yeah. DeCavs is not, there's some guys in Bayonne that are DeCav guys, and there always were. Yeah. No big deal. Me, I grew up around the Genovese guys, but DeCavs, I knew a lot of them, and I arrested some of them along the way, and I sat outside. I did a lot of surveillance in my younger years with the FBI and the task forces in Peterstown and watched these guys. But funny thing was, it bit me right in the butt. As soon as I was into the family, one of the first meetings I did, I went to Bayonne to get drugs. And they brought me right to a guy that I knew, I was familiar in that neighborhood. And so I thought, you never know. Murphy's Law, you're going to get bit in the ass. So it almost happened a couple of times. So I had to lay low after a while and be very careful who I was going to meet.
So you started to earn, greed got in the way. They introduce you, you meet Louis the dog, you meet obviously the nephew, Jimmy. And then you meet directly with a capo or, like Charlie Stango, kind of a legend in the area. He felt you out at first. So give me kind of your first meeting with Charlie and how that went.
So I knew Charlie's background. I didn't want anything to do with him because if you really look Charlie up, Charlie was the persona of a captain or even a long time standing mob guy. He was born to the life. He lived the life. He was and he still is the definition of Cosa Nostra. Yeah. True to form. When you look it up, he didn't care, So I knew his background. I knew he was a capable guy, right? And in that world, a capable guy is someone who's willing to commit the ultimate deed, which he did multiple times. And then when he was getting out, he had just been bumped to captain. So they knew he got out, he was released, he was on parole, and he went right to his meeting and he got his button to be a captain. So he became a captain. And then, what does a captain got to do? He's got to earn. So, as soon as he heard his nephew was hooked in with me, he came asking around. But he did it in a weird way. He went to the Gambinos to look at me and asked the Gambinos to vet me out.
But that's where I found interesting. You were also hooked up with the Gambino, Danny Gooms and Nino Molinelli.
Mhm.
How did you hook up with those guys?
Yeah, obviously the names have changed. You know, the bureau
Okay.
wouldn't let me use some of the real names, but yeah, it was all those guys. They hooked me up. So what happened was when Charlie wanted to know, being an old school guy, he wasn't going to meet with me directly. He's too smart. So he went to those guys and said, "Listen, my nephew is doing something. You know, go
Check
look
them
at
out.
him and check these guys out." And this is all stuff I found out later from Intel. Um, and you know, he just watched from afar, watched from the sidelines, checked it out like a scout does, and just watched things unfold. Made sure I was good for it. And then when the time came, you know, some things presented themselves to us where it was an introduction to Charlie, and I met him. He called me and his nephew Jimmy to a meeting one day, and I didn't think I was going to have anything to do with it. But he said, "Yeah, my uncle wants to meet you,
Wow.
and we both have to go." And you know, and at the time he was leaving. He was living in Florida. He was in Jersey, and this is immediately after parole. I have no
Yeah.
idea how he pulled this one off, but he
Wow.
came to Jersey. He met us, and then that was the day he was moving to Nevada, and then he moved that, and he moved to Henderson. So he met me, he put eyes on me, and says, "Well, you know, nice to meet you, Giovanni. Maybe I'll call you. Maybe I won't.
I won't.
Take it easy." And you know,
Interesting.
some time went by, and he watched for a while longer, and then he called. You know, he wanted me to call him on a burner.
So you connect the part I don't get is Brasco after Jack Garcia, right? All these things, right? And follow the organization of Cosa Nostra, right? Why? And Charlie, I think, probably had 5 to 7 made guys reporting to him, I would guess, right? I would think. I mean, I know they have 5. They used to have 7 crews. I think they're down to 5, and I
Right.
think 5 crews has about 10 guys. So he probably has 10 button guys reporting to him at that point, right? Something
Yeah, I
like
don't know if he had guys report, and I think that's why the stars aligned for me, Tom, is because I
Yeah.
slipped in when I was making good money. Right,
Yeah.
I was earning, you know, not earning for him, but I was making
Yeah.
money in the street for myself with his nephew. He was just starting to put guys together. He
Got it.
still had his guys, right? He still had his old school guys that he came up under.
Got it.
Old school guys, you know, Tinier, Scout
Yeah.
Fanny, all
Yes.
those guys, serious guys.
Yeah.
He still had them, you know, close by to really mentor or help him
Yeah.
out. I think I just hit it at the right time, you know.
That's a good point. My previous co-host, I had a show, and he was a made member, and he says there are some captains, especially when they get out of jail and they're on paper, they may be a captain of none, meaning they're their own guy, have no reports.
Right.
Because normally, you know how this works. Like, to be honest, you probably would have been in touch with an associate or at best one of his soldiers. So that did kind of work out. So that brought on Operation Charlie Horse. Now listen, like I'm a regular guy, you know, I'm Italian American, but I'm still a regular guy. That was a dangerous one, brother. Like, walk us through how Charlie Horse was set up, and you put your life at risk. So walk us through that a little bit, Giovanni.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was again, it wasn't planned. The FBI didn't turn around and say, "All right, it's Monday. Well, let's start an investigation into the decavs." So this was just things that it progressed. And I was like, all right, yeah, you know, I give it a shot. I knew the life, I knew the walk, I knew the talk, I was familiar with it but it almost bit me in the ass later too, because Luigi called me out one time and says, you know, you walk like us, you talk like us, you know, you're from this area, but you know, where you been your whole life.
Yeah.
So, you know, I had been questioned and it came up a bunch of different times. So they didn't just open their arms and welcome me in. I had to earn my way. And as it progressed, each time I went a little deeper, I was like, shit,
Yeah.
you know, this isn't going to go well. Like, but there's no turning back.
Yeah.
You know, what am I going to do? Tap out? They're not going to find somebody else. And, you know,
Correct.
I'm already in it. Well, let's see where it goes kind of thing. And then before you knew it, you know, when I met Charlie, that was it. That was like, you know, we had this instant attraction and, you know, we talked on the phone for a long time before he even shared anything with me. There was that dating period, you know, just like a regular relationship. And then as things went on, and I said, all right, you know, and then as I describe in the book, he just one day just stonewalled me. And then I saw how cold he could be. I saw that dark side of Charlie.
Wow.
He left a message for me, and his message would make your skin crawl, just the tone in his voice. And I recognized that from growing up around these guys.
Yeah.
You know, the knockaround guys and the May guys I saw, you know, having meetings in the neighborhood. You weren't privy to it, but you knew when something was going on, you know, and you knew to get out of the way or stay away. And I got that gut feeling like I was a 10-year-old kid again. And there's no turning back now. This guy's got me. And there's no saying no to this man, you know?
Well, one thing is you touched upon in the book and had a similar kind of ring for Pistone's story is, and I appreciate you being honest about that, because like you don't talk about this aspect typically when undercover work, but it was a big strain on your family. And obviously it's not a real name, but your wife Anne in the book, or your real wife, big strain on the marriage. How did you kind of deal with that?
Yeah, it's part of the reason why I wanted to write the story. I wanted people to see the risks. I didn't want to write the story to tell it cool. Originally I wanted it to be a teaching point, because I had a guy of mine, Bobby Delaney, was a New Jersey State Trooper who did this long before I came along. And that's the only law enforcement book I ever read in my career.
Oh, wow.
And I was drawn to that. And it's funny, right, how things work out, because Bobby was in Bayonne when his case. So I wanted people to see. I wanted people to have a firsthand look of what we go through as undercovers, law enforcement, but undercovers particularly, because we really can't share that. It's not like a lot of guys. So I was very raw. I was very, very raw how I shared my story. My wife, I thought, and a lot of people think, she'd have a good understanding because she herself did undercover work.
Law enforcement,
Not the case. It's like, I know what you're
know
doing.
that all too well.
Yeah, all too well. I know what you're doing. You're living in New York. You're living in Las Vegas. Yeah. So there was a balance. And I thought towards the end I had it all under control. I'm a seasoned undercover, doing this for 20 some odd years. I thought I had it all, but I didn't. But yeah, there's that rawness, and I wanted people to see from my perspective and what it did to my family, because it did take a toll on it, and still does to this day. I paid a price.
Well, I had a connection to the book too, where so one of the mentors of Charlie Stango, which Charlie talked a lot about which I want to hear your secondhand information in terms of what he shared, and his reverence for it, was Jojo Ferrara. So I played football with his son. He knocked me on my ass. I look up, and Jojo helps me up. He goes, "Oh, by the way, you're my cousin." And not like just the Italian cousin sense, like everybody's cousins, but no, his mother is Valadez from the same town as my mother, and she married Jojo. So they met Jojo, nice guy. He's kind of like a coach for the team. I go back to my mom. I'm like, "Hey, mom, we're related to Jojo," and my mother's like, "Yeah," and so she got quiet. So like as a kid, I'm like, what's going on here? So I had good experience with him. He's a very nice guy. His son was a gentleman, and cousins of mine. He unfortunately passed earlier, but I was surprised to see, not surprised, but that Stango still brought him up and almost thought of him as a mentor. So tell us a little bit about what you heard about Jojo and that kind of fun stuff.
Well, Jojo was on the radar when I was a young detective, when I was a young investigator. And of course, he always came up, and I think you and I had talked about it off. I covered his funeral with the state police and the FBI years and years ago. And it was at Corsentino's, and I remember it. And just to show what you described him, these guys didn't walk around killing people every day. It wasn't like an episode of Sopranos every day.
Correct.
These guys were exactly what you described is what I experienced as well. These guys were dads, uncles, mentors, coaches. I had them along the way too. And Jojo never, in that life, he was probably a capable guy. But,
of course,
outside of that, he was a family man, and a lot. And Charlie shared that with me. Charlie explained to me one day, long after our relationship had formed, and I was almost became like a son to him, as he described me, and I felt the same way for him. We were sitting in his home, and I told you, like, there's still a picture of Jojo on his mantle in his home,
with a cigar probably in his mouth. Right?
He was sitting by a window, and he was in a chair with a cigar. True to form. And you can see. And not to put Charlie's business out there, but you can see just the way he spoke of him and the high regard that he had for him. And he explained that he came up under Jojo and what kind of guy he was. And, and it came up. And then even Jojo came up later on in the case when I had to deliver that horrible message to another guy in another family because Charlie got hot-headed. And I had to go to a social club and, and tell this guy, Charlie's message was to go F his mother. And he wanted me to bring that to him. And he said, go there, tell him, listen, I looked out for you with Jojo. I looked out for you like a brother. I brought you on with Jojo, but go F your mother.
Well, that meeting in Vegas was crazy. You had Lucchese's guys. I don't want to say too many names, but some Lucchese's guys were there. It's in the book. But then you got an assignment to go after Louis the dog. And possibly Manny Riggy. So again, to give disclosure, I met Manny at his daughter's wedding. Nice guy to me. And I saw him last a few years back before he passed on at the golf course. And again, like that's the Italian experience. Like I know him as the father of the bride, my cousin's, father-in-law. I see him at the golf course. Hey Manny, how are you? And it's blah blah. And like that's John Riggy's son. And I know he got inducted, and I don't want to say much more, but my point being is why I get why he wanted Louis the dog, right? But why did he want Riggy? I know he backed off Riggy, I think, a little bit, but why did he want Riggy? That wasn't too clear to me.
I think because at the time, Riggy was stepping down. He was passing the torch. He was up there in age. He was going to transition out and not retire, but just step away from the seat.
He's older, yeah.
And it was one of those things and that's how Louis eventually. That's why the thing came up with Louis, because eventually Manny, and what happened was Louis was under Manny.
Yeah.
And every day, Louis is a smart guy. He drove around Frank Garacci for years when Garacci had the seat. Louis was his driver, and then Louis was a hang around Riggy. He'd go to the house, bring him bagels, bring him coffee, watch
Linden back then. Yeah.
And then Manny came in one day and said, "Listen, Pop, before you do this, you should pay. You should make this guy." And then Riggy being
that part's crazy. He literally, like, and I don't want to say too much, but I don't think he was in super great health. He literally made him without any approval.
Yeah, because he thought, I am who I am, no big deal, and which is a total violation, right? That without giving away a lot, but and that's kind of the beginning of where, and there were other things that Louis did, missteps that he had, because when he had been given that button from Riggy, his head got a little big, and even Charlie said to me one time, he's wearing a hat that don't fit his head, and
he said something, and I think it was at the Ribera Club, which I know, and I forget who it was. If you can remind me, if not, we're reading the book. But there was an elder statesman there of the DeCavalcantes, older guy walking, either walker or cane, and Louis started going after him. And even I was reading it. I had to read it 3 times. I'm like, does this guy want to die?
Yeah.
He was just disrespectful to captains and other guys in the family.
Yeah. And I think looking back, I think of Louis, and again, not living that life, but having been in it. If I could have coached Louis and gave him a little friendly advice, would have been, listen, just lay low, dude. You can iron this all out and they'll hold a ceremony for you. Don't get too big for your britches.
Correct.
But he walked into that Christmas party and that was Tenia Scalfani was sitting there.
That's right.
And, he poked him he poked Louis with his cane and made a joke. Probably just, just poking him a little bit, nudging him. And he just lost his cool. He couldn't maintain his cool and he said some things that he shouldn't have said. And that was like the beginning of the end. They were already ticked off that they didn't acknowledge him as being made. And Louis demanded, I want to be recognized,
Wow.
So I don't know why that Manny was there originally. I guess knowing the life and the way it was explained to me by Charlie. Charlie didn't make that decision. Yeah. The administration did at the time. And that's what I was told by Charlie.
Wow.
And it was like, well, if you're doing him, you might as well do his. We don't want any problem. And then they pulled it away because the family was literally split down the middle at the time.
Yeah.
Because they didn't know who was going to take the seat. It was split in half. They weren't at war, but there was a lot of conflict amongst the old school guys, and we were waiting to see where it fell.
And you and I talked a little bit about this offline, where the Cavalcantes, out of those smaller family, a lot of the names back then, again, Simone DeCavalcante, Riggy, Majuri, Garani, even D'Amato, like these guys were all serious guys. I'm not saying they were good people, but there was a certain level of respect. You had the whole Peterstown area. A lot of people moved over to Kenilworth, some to Edison, some even by me. And I kind of feel that the level of wise guy, even the made guys, dropped off dramatically in one generation. That's why I don't want to read your book. I was like, no, I still wanted to hold on to some, I always wanted to be lied to in a way. But the younger, so what do you think happened to the Cavs? As a kind of a street guy, as a former law enforcement, as an Italian American, kind of what happened to the Cavs and where are they nowadays?
Well, the younger guys, the guys that were coming up, weren't as serious and well respected as the older guys.
Correct.
Like you said, the Teniers, the Mugera, Charlie Mugera he's a legend in that world. His
Yep.
father was at the Appalachian meetings, Joey
Yep.
Merlo, you know, all
Yep.
these guys, and they were serious guys that were brought up under serious guys.
Yep.
But then it's I don't want to badmouth it, but I think that generation, they beat themselves. Those guys beat themselves, their heads against the wall, because this new generation, everybody gets a trophy, you know. And I think the kids in the street, you know, the Jimmy Smalls of the world.
Yep.
Louis had a lot of potential to be an old school guy with an old soul. I think if he played it better for himself, he had it in him because he was raised by those guys. If there were more Louis in the family, they'd be different today. Yeah. But again, the rise and fall of John Gotti and the whole media thing and the fame and fortune of the 90s. The 90s did him in, because these kids that started coming up, they were all about my father's this guy, my father's that guy. Well, who are you?
Yeah.
You know, how about standing on your own and making a name for yourself? You're living off your father's name. So, and that was across the board in all the families that I saw as an investigator. And you had these kids, you know, the fast money, fast cars, you know, the Jersey Shore thing, and, you know, all of that nonsense came in.
Now, you know,
that chipped away at the values of the family, because then it became big mouths.
Agreed. Now, I was reading in your book, and kind of similar to Pistone, they were going a few different angles. They were going to maybe have you be there when Charlie got arrested, or you were going to pop in, or it was going to, you know, there's a lot of different ways, right? And the way you went about it was he got arrested, and then they kind of like had him there, and he described it in your book. He just had like a blank stare when he found out that you were who you were. At the human level, did you feel a little bad, or is that like, you know what, that was my job?
Yeah, that was a tough one. That was probably one of the toughest in my career. You know, there was a lot of tough moments I had, but that was a hard one, because he shared with me how much he cared about me. He looked out for me like he cared as a son, as if one of my uncles or my father would do in my true life. You know, he really genuinely, you know, once he believed who I was and bought into it, and you had that level of betrayal. I didn't put you in. You put yourself in this position. You put yourself in jail. You know, you could have come out and changed your ways like so many other guys do, but you chose to go back to this world. But it was still hard on me, you know. And I watched the video of him getting processed and him getting, you know, in the FBI. I watched the video of it and his reaction to it, and you know, it didn't sit well with me. It made me sick to my stomach. But again, I got to say to myself, if it wasn't me that was given the task to kill Louis, he'd be dead today. Yeah. You know, so he really would be, you know, and I'm glad they gave it to me. I'm glad, you know, because in a way I saved him, and in a way I saved, you know, Charlie's in jail. He'll do his time. He's a gangster's gangster. Yeah. You know, the best was in his processing when he told the federal government when he dumped out in the morning, he didn't flush the toilet. And he said, and you see that? And he pointed to the toilet, and, you know, he said, that's what I think of the federal government. Now put me back in jail, you know?
And, I like when you mentioned also, you meant Corsentino. He's much older now. He laid out my father when I was 17, and a lot of people in my family. His father was the one that started the double-decker, as you know, the double-decker coffins. You know, when we wrap it up soon, but what you know, what did you learn, you know, about yourself, and what did you learn about, because we all know, let's cut through the BS. The Italian culture, Italian American culture, is separate from the mob culture. I'm sorry, like you know this, I know this. You know, I love the mob stuff on a I don't know, like a hobby level, but in podcasting level. But I know like the real deal that it's generally not part of the Italian American community. So, what did you learn again about yourself, about being Italian American, you know, during your assignment as Giovanni Rocco?
Well, we know what the Italian American family is. You just described it. It's looking out for each other. It's giving our shirt off of our back to somebody who needs it. You know, we'll give it whatever it takes in that community. And people did that to me in my life growing up, and I would do the same for somebody else. These guys just feed off of people. You know, that's what Cosa Nostra does. That's what these guys, you know, if they're good family people, they're providers because they're stealing from others. That's not the Italian American way. You know, that's not that loving, caring way that we were taught and we were raised in and witnessed. These guys are just opportunists. They are criminals. When I saw, and again, I had those moments of emotional turmoil when I felt like, man, I'm kicking one of my own. You know, I'm turning on somebody from my old neighborhood, you know. And again, meeting Corsentino, meeting him the day that they didn't go on the record and make me, but they introduced me as as Charlie's kid. And that's the day I was introduced to Corsentino, who I knew, and I watched him bury everybody's family, right? And it's hard. It's hard to go home, and it's hard to, it's hard not to feel like, damn, it just turned on another person from my neighborhood or from my life. So there was a lot of turmoil, but these guys quickly reminded you the underhandedness. They would rob the eyes out of each other's heads if they had to survive. They truly would.
Yeah, and you get that in the book. So before we wrap up, what are you working on next? There's going to be a sequel, a movie, working on some other projects. If you can't share, we understand. But what's next for Giovanni Rocco?
Right now, I'm busy, knee deep in mental health and helping first responders right now, and military guys just getting their life together. Having done it myself and having gone through it and rebuilding, it's not an easy thing to do. So I'm paying it forward with those guys and trying to get involved. I have thought about doing another book on that experience, the stressors and the whole mental health end of it. Trying to do something like that. Nothing yet. Your lips to God's ears for a movie deal or a TV. I don't know. Because there's so many other great stories, right? So many other great stories you could tell from this. The Bureau chopped it up. They chopped the manuscript up. They probably took about 100 pages out, So, I'd love to see it to go to second edition so I could share some more, because there's some great things in there they just wouldn't let me share. But yeah, that's, hopefully we'll see what comes next. I'm taking it day by day and see where it goes.
Yeah. So listen, Giovanni's Ring, my inside of the Real Sopranos, Giovanni Rocco with Douglas Schofield. I'm going to put a link below to buy it on Amazon. I don't endorse a lot of books. I believe in Giovanni. It's a great story. We didn't touch on 10% of what's in the book. So Giovanni, I'll leave you with the parting words. What's your advice to somebody watching who, is still enamored with the life, still that kind of stuff? Give us some parting words of people that are watching, maybe with mental health issues, maybe confronted with conflicts in their life, maybe some stressors. How do you close it out?
Yeah, listen, I think I'm still enamored. You and I are both enamored with the life. It draws us in and sucks us in, but don't forget who they really are. It's not all Hollywood glitz and glamour. It's not that way. And if I can ever help anybody, reach out to me. I have a website now, giovannisring.com. If you're looking for last minute Christmas, I'm signing the books and I'll send them out to you. I'll get them out to you. My folks doing it, I'll personalize it. And if anybody is struggling or needs help with anything, reach out to me or, through you, whichever way they have to. There's a lot of people struggling these days, and you just have to be there to pay it forward. So I appreciate the opportunity, Tom.
It's an honor and privilege. We talk about a lot of the former wise guys, but the truth of the matter is you're the real hero, law enforcement, and thank you for being on the Armchair MBA.